that's when I started to really get to grips with how the behavior of the organization really impacts the employee, right? How the organization, how leadership is behaving, how they're showing up every day.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Better Happy Podcast, hosted by myself, Mike Jones. On the Better Happy Podcast, we answer the big question: how do people-focused business owners and business leaders create cultures that deliver exceptional results whilst looking after the health and happiness of their people and without burning people out? Today, I'm absolutely delighted to have Emmet Colville with me. Emmet is a behavioral psychologist. He works with a variety of different people and different organizations under his organization, You Parallel. And there's a little blurb on Emmet's website that I would like to read to you, because I think it gives a good overview of what he does in the workplace, because that is a key part of Emmet's offering. So You Parallel supports employees experiencing common emotional health and wellbeing problems such as worry, stress, and so on. We also train the skills that enhance general resilience, life satisfaction, and behavioral effectiveness. So that's a brief intro to you, Emmet. How about you? Well, first of all, thank you for joining us today. Probably let me talk.
All right. Well, great to be here. Pleasure to be invited on. I'm not going to lie, it's these podcasts do tend to increase my anxiety somewhat, but
Well,
normal. So I'm glad to be here.
Right? So that perhaps that's something we'll talk about today. I remember for me, when I was first doing work with Ross McIntosh, and he shared with me some of the things he struggles with, and I remember thinking, "Wow, you're a psychologist. That can't be right. You struggle with stuff." And it's like this understanding that we're all just human beings, right? I think we tend to have this notion that if you've got a degree in psychology, you've figured out the mind, so no more issues for you. But that's very untrue, right?
No, I mean, I get caught out, just like everyone else, especially when I'm doing something that's important, when we're trying to push out an important message and to help people. But I do get caught out. I'm just noticing my hands are sweaty and my heart is beating a bit fast. But I'm doing something that's important. So that tells me,
and that's a theme
that's a good thing.
That's a theme that we'll talk about today, right? Because we both share an interest in something called ACT, which I'm sure we'll dig into, which really has the underlying message of it's about taking action even when you're uncomfortable, right? That's what life is. It leads to us being happier. Tell us a little bit, Emmet, before we start digging into some tips and insights and thoughts and tidbits for people that lead people, how to do that better and how to better lead themselves. Just give us a little overview of how you got into being a behavioral / organizational psychologist and doing the kind of work that you do.
You know, I've thought about this many times, and now that you're asking me, my mind is kicking off. It's like, find the answer quick. But I think my passion for making or helping the experience of employees not suck in the workplace came from being managed in a way that made me feel like I was being strangled, or I had no control over my job. It was micromanaged. There was a lot of rules and bureaucracy that kind of held me back from doing good work. So I'd probably take you back to 2010. I started working in financial services. And
how old were you then, Emmet? Roughly
12, 13 years. God, what's the math? 25, 26.
Okay. So first job, well, not first job, but one of your earlier 26. Jobs, 25, and you were in.
Sure, yeah. Well, I graduated in 2009, and it was just the worst time to graduate. My plan was to go into work as an assistant psychologist for the NHS.
Yep.
I tried, failed, couldn't get into it, and I had to pivot. Right,
due to the recession.
Yeah, absolutely. Post 2008, the fallout from that.
Yep.
And that you can sit back and watch the world go by. You can think of ways to try and pivot, and I pivoted and thought, well, I'm going to have to do something that I didn't think I'd ever have to do, which is to work in financial services. So I went in at a customer service account management level, and I quickly realized that the way that the team was being run or managed, it was more about command and control. And for me, that felt like suffocating. So my plan was to work my way up and move out of that role. So I should probably point out that whilst I felt like that, looking back, I can appreciate a lot of the reasons behind why managers behave in particular ways.
Yeah, I my first professional career was the military, and probably quite similar, right? If you're going to get micromanaged, then the military is certainly a place there's a high likelihood of that happening, and you certainly don't have the opportunity to be innovative, to be creative, and to flourish. You kind of do, and you're graded on your ability to follow instructions, right, and be disciplined. So I certainly didn't have the best experience in that career, but I also look back and wouldn't change it, and it can again see many of the benefits to going through that experience. But you
Absolutely.
did. I'm thinking there was so probably similar. I've had some very positive experiences in my business, in my roles, in my professional, in my jobs, and I've had some very negative experiences. And the thing that I've noticed is the experience that you have at work has a huge knock-on effect to how you feel and function as a human being outside of work, which is unsurprising, really, if we zoom out. But even before this experience with you at 25, you've chosen to do behavioral psychology or organizational psychology at the University of London?
Yes, I studied my master's degree in organizational psychology at City University. Yeah.
So what led to you choosing that? What do you think? What do you think was floating around your mind in your younger years to make you think I'm interested in the human psyche and behavior? Sorry, did you say it was organizational psychology?
Well, it was organizational psychology, but my undergrad degree is in psychology.
Okay.
So I pursued. There's a theme there. I was fascinated by human behavior because I used to watch Cracker as a young lad, Robbie Coltrane.
Yeah.
I used to watch Taggart, and for some reason, well, clearly pursuing a purpose with no terminal endpoint at that point, even though I didn't realize at that age of 19, leaving Ireland, moved to Scotland, studied my undergrad there, thinking I would become a forensic psychologist. And the recession happened. I then went into financial services. I worked my way into quality control within financial services, from customer service and account management. Then I went into internal communications. And that's when I started to really get to grips with how the behavior of the organization really impacts the employee, right? How the organization, how leadership is behaving, how they're showing up every day, the language that they use.
When you say that, the behavior of the organization, because I struggle with this. So the organization or the business isn't really a thing, right? It's a concept. It's like, it doesn't, you can't go and find the organization in a room. So when you say the behavior of the organization, and you did allude to this after, is this what you mean, like how the leadership team compose themselves?
Sure, yeah. Leadership, middle management, how they show up, the types of behaviors that they elicit every day, the things. This is rooted in the culture, really. It's the everyday behaviors that signal to the employee this or that. And you see a misalignment with what they say versus what they do. For me, anyway, someone who's incredibly analytic, who pushes against authority. I mean, we could go further back into my childhood, but let's
do that. Go back to that. So I'm interested in. I've got two things that are coming out already. So first of all, I'm interested in why this is so. Why do you think this is so common? Why? Because it is common, right? Why is it so common that people in leadership positions and just the general culture of organizations tends to go to not what it should be. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit, because I have a theory that I don't think it's out of malice. I think it's just humans being humans. But I think that's a good conversation for us to have. But yeah, you just talked a little bit about you there being very analytical, but also pushing back against authority potentially in different situations. And then you said we could go back into my childhood. I think that's interesting. I think it helps us understand you as a character. So do it. Let's go then.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't difficult for me to talk about, but it's a story that I've been grappling with, and I think the more I can tell this story, the more free I will become, I suppose. So I'm happy to do it, but I think it goes to my parents separated in 1989. My father was a very, pardon me?
Sorry, what age?
Oh, I was 4 years old.
4 years old, yeah.
But I won't go into the whole backstory, but essentially my mum became a single parent, and I have 7 brothers, 3 sisters, big family. And the parenting aspect, I suppose, was lots of love and lots of care, but there was no authority. There was no parenting going on around rules and what to do, what not to do.
Yep.
My mum did her best, of course, but if I was reared by my older brothers, really, in many ways. So so you
said you had 7 sisters, 3 brothers, is that right?
7 brothers, 3 sisters.
Wow. Okay, yeah. 7 brothers, 3 sisters. And where did you sit
family
in regards to age in that?
I was the third youngest.
The third youngest. Okay, right.
Yeah. And I think any male character that came into our lives was just, it was a no-no for us. Of course, we can, the psychology, all of that matters, but I think that's where it comes from. But also injustice. I think I grew up a lot watching. I grew up watching Cracker. I grew up watching Taggart. I grew up watching things being done to people, bad things, and I didn't. I guess in some way I made a secret promise to myself that I wouldn't allow those things to happen to me.
So if you grew up, I resonate with this. So parents separated, and I think there's a lot in this theme where if there's an absent father, there is often, if the mum's still there, but not always, a lot of love and a lot of support and care, but a lack of discipline and structure, which creates a difficult situation, I think, and it does lead to a lot of rebellion and potentially lots of issues in society when a young man especially doesn't have that discipline and confidence that comes from having that authoritative figure, right? So, but out of interest for you, so you're in this, you're quite a unique situation there, really, that you're in this group of 10. You're one of the youngest. Were you treated fairly, or were you kind of just as you would expect from a group of young lads? Were you kind of like a bit not beaten up, but kind of led?
Well, I suppose the family was broken down into 2 groups. There was the older group and then the younger group. The older group sort of flew the nest, 3 or 4 of my siblings. And then I had my 2 older brothers and my younger siblings. So I mean, my sister my older sister, 2 years older than me, she gave me a hard time. I had to fight.
Kids aren't fair, right? They don't think like that, especially if they don't have authority around them. They don't think in a fair way, right?
No, and my brothers would encourage this, of course. So I did feel, I guess I did feel there was a lot of unfairness.
So,
and
yeah. Is it to me as an external to your psyche looking in, is it maybe not that surprising that you're interested in organizational psychology, considering that you were really reared in a organization, I would say, of 10 people or 5, without a solid leader as such? You got the care and the support, but you didn't have the leader. And you're like you said, you're by your psyche is that you're quite analytical. So potentially there was a lot of time there where you weren't treated fairly, and there was not a lot you could do about that. And now you like to work in organizations and with employees and look at the structure and look at why things should be done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also
so that no one,
the literature or the visual literature is all about law or crime and fairness. And sorry, I'm telling you.
No, I think that's a good. I haven't really reflected on it in that way, but that makes sense, and it kind of joins up really with the work that I do today on purpose in life, and whether a child can discern a purpose from a very young age or not. Well, the science shows that we can, or children can, except we don't necessarily know it. So for me, my purpose, I guess, was about pursuing fairness and not wanting to let anything that happened to me in an unfair way happen to other people. So that thread, I guess, carrying it through into adult life and into my professional career, yeah, that makes sense. I think the turning point for me, Mike, when it comes to why I decided to pursue organizational psychology and sort of, I suppose, the penny dropped, was when I first moved, when I left Scotland and moved to London at the end of 2014. I worked for an organization who specialized in matchmaking, high net worth matchmaking organization for the rich, famous, wealthy, whatever way you want to position it.
You mean dating?
Yeah. And I was essentially a business psychologist helping with coaching clients, matchmaking. I don't know if you've ever seen the program. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. I don't think if you've ever seen the program, what's it called? Married at First Sight.
Well, I can honestly, hand on heart, say I've never sat and watched Married at First Sight, but
good. I'm going to say good.
I can also say, quite ashamedly, that the reels.
You've heard of it.
The reels of Married at First Sight have drawn me in. So through the combination of short videos, I probably have accumulated watching a whole episode. But yeah, it's trash TV, right?
Right. So the way the panels, the experts sit down and they talk about the matches and why they're a good match, why they're not a good match, etc. That was part of my job in this organization.
How do you do that? So what's, obviously we know you've got a degree and a lot of education in behavioral, in psychology, behavioral psychology, organizational, but what, when they say, right, Emmet, with your knowledge, come and help us align people that could in theory be married at first sight, what do you look into? Like, how do you even begin to do that?
So this organization had a set structure as to how to do that. Mm-hmm. This was part of, I mean, I haven't even, gotten into how crazy this got with this organization. So I won't spend too much time on it because it is quite a lengthy story, but the systems and the processes and the procedures that they used, to me, as someone who had studied psychology and looking in this organization and being in it and seeing them operate the way that they did, I thought, you guys claim to be psychologists, you claim to be helping people and matching them, but none of this adds up. I had 26 clients who had serious issues with the service, and we were talking about £18,000 to £30,000 a year for this service.
Sorry, just for my clarity, and I'm just following along for other people that are listening. Are you talking about the program or the business? Were you working on the program, or were you just drawing parallels to the job that you were doing?
No, I was working in that organization.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So the people that made the program Married at First Sight?
No, sorry. I'm just comparing.
I've confused the audience there. So you're working. Yeah. People pay to get professionally match made, which draws parallels to Married at First Sight, but you're not
similar. Yes, yeah,
not,
nothing to do. Yeah, let's clarify. Absolutely,
That's me.
nothing.
Sorry, I got excited.
Nothing to do with Married at First Sight.
Because I'm just saying, well, surely on Married at First Sight, they're going to consciously match people they know aren't going to get on for television viewing, right? But yeah, we're talking about active people paying money to be match made to.
Yes, in this organization.
And how much did you say they're paying? But what's the range?
Between 18 and 30,000, yeah, a year.
And what do you kind of get for that? I mean, do you get like
you were to get 8 matches, and you were to be matched with like-minded people who have similar net worth to you, similar lifestyle,
premium Tinder, right?
Exactly that. However, it wasn't, and that was where I started to think something's not right here. So I started to investigate because I was getting 26 clients complaining, telling me, this is rubbish. You guys aren't doing what you're meant to be doing.
Sorry,
so
thanks. I've got it. I'm thinking about the questions that people are going to have that listening to this. They're going to be interested. So what kind of complaints do you get when somebody's paid 18 to 30 odd grand for 8?
I remember, and look, I suppose I need to be mindful here that the clients were profoundly affected by this, right? They were deeply psychologically affected by that process not delivering what it was meant to. So respecting and being sensitive around that. But some of the clients would turn up for lunch, meet their prospective new partner, and they would end up paying for their own lunch because the person that they met had no money. So what was happening was the organization, the people matching were basically headhunting anyone who met some criteria.
So it's only one person that's paying. So that you have one person paying, but then the match for that person wasn't another paying person. This could be anybody.
Sometimes, yes, the majority, yeah. So just to speed up this story, because there's a lot into it, I blew the whistle on the sales process because I thought this is wrong. It's broken. Clients are not being.
It's unfair,
it's unfair. Little did I realize that the CEO who I blew the whistle to was well aware, and it was used as a personal bank account in many ways. The business no longer exists. We ended up in they sued me twice. I defended myself successfully at the High Court. I supported another client, and it took 2.5 years. But when I decided to do my master's in 2017, that was the driving force. I thought, never will I work for an organization as toxic as this. Never will I allow people to be subjected, employees to be subjected to such toxicity. And so I'm going to do something about this, which is why I went and did the master's.
Yeah. Okay. So it's that fairness piece again, though, right? It's doing the right thing. It's having morals and standing up for them. And what I find interesting about that story you just told is, I think what happened there, you can probably draw parallels to on a spectrum of all organizations, right? So that's probably at the very high end of the motivation to make more money quickly being compromising the quality of service to a point where there's no quality of service whatsoever, right? And it has a negative impact, as you said, on when you do that, when you throw fairness and process and due diligence out the window and you just focus on making money, when you know it's not delivering a good service, that's going to have a negative impact on the employees because they know they're not doing a good job. They know they're not doing something right. And as you also said, in a situation like that, it's going to have a really negative impact on the people as well, because the customers, because they're spending a lot of money on this service and being made to feel like, well, even when I spend this money, bad things still happen. So go on.
But look, I think I tried my best to turn it around. I presented a new way of doing things, a more robust sales process, a more fairer coaching process, fairer contracts. I presented something back to the organization and I was laughed at. And I mean, it was corrupt. The mind was corrupt. The CEO's mind was corrupt. The managing director's mind was corrupt because of money, because it was all about them and at the expense of hundreds of people. And I'm I was on pittance. These people were worth millions. It didn't matter to me. It was about the morality of the service and delivering what you say you're going to deliver. And
yeah, I guess there's this, I see this image in my mind, or this process in my mind, that often in a business, regardless of what the business is, it is quicker to make more money if you do things with maybe not in the right way. And when I say the right way, there's a level of how much to the rule should you stick. But in that example there, it's like, let's just completely go against what we should be doing, but which is going to make it easier for us to make money in the short run. But I also think that when you do that, you're severely limiting your shelf life, right? Because yes, although you're making quick money right now, you're going to get found out, you're going to go, your customers aren't going to be happy. That can only just be sustained for so long.
I'd be lying if that whole experience traumatized me. It still has an effect on me today. But I can I can look in on that situation now, and I know that the corruption in the mind was all grounded in fear, shame, anger. Because once you go down that road, it's very hard to turn around if you don't have the professional support and help. And I'm talking about the CEO. You've been doing this for 10, 15 years, and you can't do a U-turn because you're so ingrained in your behavior around making all of this money. And I look at that now and I think I have compassion for whatever was going on for that person, because to choose that way of doing business, you've got to be you've got to have some really deep-rooted issues.
But this happens a lot, right? This happens in a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
Maybe not on as extreme a scale, but essentially a lot of the time, I had some really dark times in the military because I had some senior leaders that were corrupt. They, when I say corrupt, they weren't taking money, they weren't taking funds out of, the taxpayer's pocket and running away and spending on holidays, but they were consciously not looking after people, consciously doing things that only serve their own gain, for their own promotion, their own recognition, and consciously making other people's lives very uncomfortable in that process. So were they corrupt in regards to the example you've just given? No. But were they corrupt? Well, I suppose, how do we define corrupt? In my eyes, it's somebody that does things that aren't correct or moral in order for their own gain. And I think that happens a lot, right? I think and I'm sure you and I have both done things that we could look at that way that have been corrupt in our own lifetime. So why do you think that happens so commonly in organizations? Why do you think there's a need for the kind of things that you do?
Look, in its simple terms, I think, the way there's this huge drive at the moment around improving digital skills in organizations, there's a digital skills gap, a major issue here in the UK. Whilst that's true, I think there's a much bigger issue, and I think there's a psychological skills gap. I think us humans, we're taught how to read, write, what to believe, what to say, how to behave, but we're not taught these really useful, simple psychological skills that can serve us really well in our life as we go through our life. So to answer your question, I think why Well, the first one is awareness. I think people lack the ability to be able to relate to their environment and be aware of how their behavior is impacting other people. If you have that one skill, the rest tend to follow. The skills relating to what I'm talking about. And I think that's a very simple way of explaining why this issue exists. Because if you're not aware, then how can you possibly be able to pivot or change your behavior so that you're not having a negative impact on people?
But for that CEO, for example, I know it's an extreme example, but perhaps he was aware that what he was doing wasn't good for the clients and good for the people, yet he carried on. And I think with my experience in the military, it ended up with me. It's not as extreme as your version, but I had to record somebody secretly in a senior position to me, threatening to make my life difficult because I was leaving the military. And I knew they were going to do this. And I knew that it happens, right? Yeah. So I recorded it and I went through the official complaint process, which in the army is unheard of. Like, you do not complain against a senior officer. And if you do, you know that your career is over. The only reason I had the ability to pursue this was because I was leaving anyway. So I was like, you know what, a bit like you, I'm going to do the right thing because I'm going to leave, and I'd rather stand by my morals than let this person get away with this behavior. So I went through the complaint process, and it's this long drawn out process, and you have somebody from a different unit come and work with you so that you're represented fairly. But it's a mock court, it's what they're saying. It's a charade. So at the end of this 3-week process, they basically sat there and said, well, we've listened to both sides and we've come to the conclusion that we believe this person over you because they're more senior than you. And I was like, brilliant. Okay. Well, then I said, well, everything I've told you, I've got on recording on my phone. And you watch the faces drop. And they were dumbfounded that I'd shared this with them at the end. And it's because I knew that if I told them at the beginning, I wanted to see if they would do the right thing, and I knew they wouldn't, right? So at the end, I told them this thing, and they asked me to leave the room. So we need to discuss what you just shared with us. And they basically said, right, we need to take this away, this information that you've shared, and think about what we're going to do. And what happened was, about 3 days later, I got called into the CO's office, the most senior officer in this regiment, and I got a formal apology. I got asked not to repeat this to the other people in the unit. And then I got a written letter of apology, which I got asked not to share. And what I found really fascinating was that I never got asked to share the recording. They never even listened to the recording. And that's because they knew.
Okay.
They knew. So this corruption is more common than we think. Everybody in that room knew that what I was saying was the truth, but it was easier to just pin it on me and just brush it under the carpet than actually address some poor behavior, because it might create admin or bring about person. So that's corruption, right? It's not embezzling funds, but it's corruption.
Yeah, it's the authoritarian leadership. That's what it is,
So you said there about having awareness, but what about why do you think it happens even when people do have awareness? Like, your CEO of that company knew that what.
Well, I don't. Here's the thing, though. I would say if you were aware at the human level, then your morality would kick in and be like, hang on a second, this isn't right. So you might be aware surface level, right? Where it's like, I'm aware that, this isn't the truth. I'm aware that what we're doing isn't necessarily the right thing. But I'm talking about aware of the human impact and being connected emotionally to what that really means for you and for other people.
So really, when you're saying aware, you're actually, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're actually leaning into having a level of connection to your spiritual being, to being connected to the fact that if you're a good human and do good things, your life will be better. And that if you're disconnected.
Absolutely. That's the level of awareness we're talking about, not surface level. I'm aware that I ignored my flatmate when I ran past her yesterday because I needed to get in and have a shower and make some dinner quite quickly because I was, focused in a zone. But I also had this deeper level of awareness that I want to apologize and say, it wasn't because I was being
Because
good
you have
without
a level of connection to your spiritual being or your
to being a decent human being.
but that's a moral, that's a spiritual
Mm.
thing, right? Because I learned this. So I after the army, I went and lived in Nepal and Thailand and traveled, and I felt quite unhappy. And I was living in Australia, so I traveled all around Southeast Asia and Australia. And one day I was walking through a train station in Perth, thinking to myself, I live in a beautiful city. I've got no stresses. I'm out of the army. I've got money in the bank. I'm a healthy guy. I've landed in another easy job. So life's very good to me. And I remember thinking, but I still feel a sense of something missing. And I remember just having this internal dialogue that, am I just a bit miserable? Am I just never going to be happy with life, no matter how good it can be to me? And I saw a book in a shop window, loads of this book, because it's being promoted, and you have like the same book 50 times. And it was The Art of Happiness with the face of the Dalai Lama on the front. And I thought to myself, whilst having this internal dialogue about, am I just destined to be miserable and unhappy? There's a book with this spiritual looking guy looking at me called The Art of Happiness. I thought perhaps I should read this book. And I read that book in one day. I just couldn't put it down. And essentially what it taught me is what you're talking about here. And it's that it teaches you the basics of living a spiritual life, and not in a woo-woo kind of way as we might see it in the West when we think about Buddhists and all that, but in a very practical, logical way. And he's actually written it with a psychologist called Harold Cutler, I think. It doesn't matter. And he literally explains step by step, look, if you live a hedonistic lifestyle, which the West teaches us, so just go out, work hard, get paid, buy all these nice things, treat yourself, chase your sexual partners, whatever it is you want to do, you're never going to feel happy, because this is all temporary happiness. Money, for example, like you talked about with the CEO, or career, if you just chase those things, you won't feel happy. You will feel happy when you find out what you're passionate about, when you help people, when you contribute to others, when you feel connected to people. And he also talks about these psychological skills, such as not holding on to a grudge, because that only makes you unhappy, not the other person, and being able to be aware of what's going on in your mind, and all of this kind of stuff. And I remember reading this book and thinking, oh my God, why is this not taught in school? We're taught maths, we're taught English, all these things that you just talked about, but we're not taught the basic skills, the psychological skills that lead to us being happy people. And ironically, the stuff that leads to us being happy people leads to us being good people that contribute to the world. And I think this is one of the key things that's missing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we are told day in and day out, I see it in news articles, online media, social media, this skills gap around digital skills and the issues around why are people afraid of it? Why can't people, close that gap? I'm like, well, it's obvious, because we're not psychologically equipped to make that leap just yet around closing this digital skills gap. So let's maybe start, closing the psychological skills gap and helping people to discern those skills and cultivate them and embed them instead of.
So what you're saying is that constantly focusing on the hard skills as such is a bit of a distraction from the fact that we're just, as a society and as a nation, not really trained in the psychological skills that would lead to us having the mindset we need to embrace those new skills. So we're kind of
absolutely, you've said it better than I could. Yeah,
we're treating the symptoms, not the root cause.
Yeah, and that seems to be the way we do things in the field of psychology. I mean, we don't need more research. We don't need more studies. We have it all, right? But it takes about 17 years for research to leave the lab to get into mainstream society, and only 5% of it is ever taken up anyway. Successive governments all over the world are consulted and told, this is what we need to do. And then the scientists and psychologists, social sciences, whatever, are told, well, why don't you figure out how we do it and then come back to us? And there's just this complete lack of implementation science around this stuff. And that's why the UK, I mean, as far as our well-being goes, we're a sick nation. Ireland's the same. This is where I come from. We have a lot of work to do. And I'll actually share with you, I was out on Saturday night with some friends. I don't drink, and it was the first time that I've been out Now, this isn't me being judgmental at all. This is me observing and being acutely aware, this deep awareness that I'm talking about, that people are, it feels like we are not given the best opportunities to be able to respond to our life in an effective way. And being out on Saturday night in central London, seeing people, seeing a lot of lost people was quite difficult and very sad, because I'm like, this awareness is missing. And these people will turn up to organizations today and go through the motions and experience lack of support, lack of, managerial support, lack of whatever. And they'll repeat the cycle again. Like I said, it sounds a bit judgmental, but
I don't
it's
think
a concern.
I don't think it sounds judgmental. I think it sounds like you're analytical, like you said at the very beginning of the call, and you're looking at processes. I often feel a bit, what's the right word? I often feel a bit smug because I spent 3 years almost traveling after the military, and basically I after I got into reading the Dalai Lama, I quit drinking, started volunteering, living a better life, becoming a better human being. Ironically, for selfish reasons, because I realized that being a good person was going to help me be happier, right? So I was being sensibly selfish. And I read loads and loads of Buddhism, old Buddhist books, new Buddhist books, some of the most ancient kind of Sanskrit and Pali Canon stuff. Not in Sanskrit, I'm not that intelligent at all. Translated into English. And what you were saying then about, we don't need more studies. I found that really fascinating, because I read a lot of studies, I read a lot of science, I read a lot of books, and because I had that 3-year phase of just geeking out on Buddhism and some other spiritualities, everything I read now in science and the latest studies, like, yeah, we already know that from 2,500 years ago. Like the Buddha was sharing this information. And people had the same issues, and people were drinking and gambling because they weren't connected to anything higher than themselves, and they didn't have the skills to get through their own issues, so they mask it with or try and sedate it with alcohol and drugs and sex and entertainment and whatever else it is. If you're enjoying this episode between Emmet and myself, please be sure to check into the second half of the conversation, which will be released in the next week or so on the channel.